England's first World Cup in 1950 was a masterclass in how not to prepare for a football tournament. England had a squad full of talent, some might even say a golden generation, but the hubris of the FA and their arrogant attitude towards the tournament would prove decisive. None of this was the players' fault though. Despite it all, 21 England stars turned up in Brazil, eager to bring home glory for their country. Here are the stories of those 21 members of England's first Football World Cup squad. Let's start with the men who played every minute. Bert Williams. England's goalkeeper of choice for their World Cup debut was Wolverhampton Wanderers legend, Bert Williams. Already with numerous caps to his name, the Cat played every minute of England's first World Cup campaign. He kept a clean sheet against Chile in the opener, and did everything he could against the USA and Spain, but was ultimately unable to prevent England's early exit. An icon at Wolves, he made over 400 appearances and won both the league title and FA Cup. After football, he established a goalkeeping coaching school that produced over 10 Football League goalkeepers. In this role, he was a vocal advocate for goalkeeping coaching and personal trainers in football. He was awarded an MBE for his charity work and lived to be 93, passing away in 2014. Alf Ramsey. At right fullback was a man you may have heard of. You may know Alf Ramsey from such World Cup wins as 1966. But before becoming a successful coach, he was a tidy and respected player. A classy fullback, Ramsey's defensive positional sense and leadership was exceptional, and he played every minute of the tournament. He was very critical of the team's preparations for the World Cup in Brazil. The poor quality food, the lack of training time, the FA's refusal to allow the players to travel early to acclimatise, and the prioritization of goodwill gestures over training were all failings he made careful note of. He also didn't appreciate the FA's interference and the intense press scrutiny, traits he would take into his management career. 16 years later, with this experience behind him, he ensured that England were meticulously prepared to win the trophy on home soil. He was awarded a knighthood for his services to English football in 1967, and is still the only manager to bring it home. Billy Wright. The captain of the team at that World Cup was the incomparable Billy Wright. An England legend, he was the first England player to earn 100 caps. His leadership skills and class were crucial to the team. A Wolves legend who led them to 3 First Division titles, Billy Wright was a football icon, with everything from the superstar profile to the glamorous wife. Best known as a centre-back for his club, he actually started all 3 World Cup matches at half-back. He was also critical of the setup, but accepted full responsibility for the team's failure and did not make excuses. One gripe he made no bones about. He firmly believed that Neil Franklin's absence cost them dearly. He held Franklin to be the best defender in the world, and he saw the FA's refusal to lift his ban for the tournament as plain hubris. Wright had an extensive, 20-year-plus career as a one-club man for Wolves, for whom he made over 500 appearances, most as captain. His record of 90 caps as captain of England is also a feat only matched by the late, great Bobby Moore. After football, he had a brief but unremarkable career as a manager before moving into punditry on TV. On his death in 1994, Wolves named a stand in his honour and his ashes were fittingly scattered on the Molineux pitch. Jimmy Dickinson. Pompey star man, Jimmy Dickinson, was first-choice left-half for all 3 matches. A consummate sportsman, Gentleman Jim never received a single booking or sending off in all his 845 club appearances. A Portsmouth legend, he was an integral part of their double title-winning side of the late 1940s. Pompey even forked out for a club car for him, something commonplace now, but highly unusual for the era. Dickinson had a pretty unremarkable World Cup in 1950 but would create a somewhat unwanted legacy in the next tournament. In the 1954 edition, he became, so far, the only England player to score an own goal at the World Cup. For his faithful service to the club, he was honoured with a statue outside Fratton Park in 2023. Laurie Hughes. At centre-half, the selectors made the first controversial decision. Filling a huge, Neil Franklin-shaped hole was Liverpool's uncapped defender, Laurie Hughes. Hughes was tall, strong, and dominant in the air. A solid defender in his own right. But he was no Neil Franklin. By his own admission, he remarked that the team simply never got going, and he was arguably culpable for Spain's winning goal in match 3. The Liverpool legend, who had a decade-long career at Anfield, was part of their title-winning team of 1947. Although he was a mainstay at Liverpool for another 7 years, his England career was over in a flash. In fact, all 3 of his caps were won at this tournament. Following his football career, he owned several businesses in Liverpool and passed away in 2011 as one of the last surviving members of the 1950 World Cup team. Stan Mortensen. The Blackpool bombshell scored England's first ever World Cup goal. A prolific and clever inside forward, he was known for his energetic play and his monstrous shot. His speed off the mark was one of his strongest assets. Mortensen played in all 3 matches, playing inside left against Chile and USA, then inside right against Spain. In 1950, he was at the peak of his powers, starring in an exciting Blackpool team that included the likes of Jackie Moody and Stanley Matthews. Incredibly, he survived serious head injuries whilst serving in the RAF during the war. Doctors said he'd never play again, yet here he stood, one of Blackpool and England's star men. Reflecting on the tournament, he famously complained about the hotel food, remarking that even the dustbins had ulcers from it. In a legendary career, he scored 197 goals for Blackpool and once scored in every round of a single FA Cup tournament. Then there was that famous hat-trick in the FA Cup final that, somewhat harshly for Mortensen, was forever known as the Matthews final. Later in life he played lower league football, and had a brief stint as Blackpool manager before leaving the sport. He died in 1991, aged 69. Tom Finney. You might not know all of the players in this squad, but if you don't know Tom Finney, you don't know football. The Preston Plumber is widely regarded as one of the greatest footballers ever to play the game. He was a complete forward, equally adept playing on either wing or through the middle. Two-footed, pacey, elegant and composed in front of goal. Finney won 76 England caps, a record at the time of his retirement, and scored 30 goals for the 3 Lions. He was the first player voted FWA Footballer of the Year twice. Finney played all 3 games at the 1950 World Cup, starting as outside right against Chile and USA, then switching to outside left against Spain to make room for Stanley Matthews. Another true gent, he also never received a booking in his long, storied career. After football, he became president of his beloved Preston North End, and was knighted in 1998 for his services to the game. He died in 2014 at 91. With FA selector Arthur Drury rattled by the humiliating defeat to the amateur players of the USA, the changes were rung for the final game. Amid much controversy, star men such as Jackie Milburn and Stanley Matthews had been forced to watch from the stands as England bottled it against the United States. It served as a wake-up call, and England brought out the big guns against Spain. Jackie Milburn. Geordie legend Jackie Milburn was one of the top strikers in the country in 1950. Though he arrived late to the tournament and missed match 1, the English public couldn't believe he was left out of the team to face the USA. Questions were raised about the FA's bizarre philosophy of never changing a winning team. Newcastle's star forward, Jackie was nicknamed Jet for his blistering pace. It also happened to match his initials perfectly. John Edward Thompson Milburn was a phenomenal goalscorer, bagging 200 goals for Newcastle, a record only bested by Alan Shearer in 2006. In his one appearance in the 1950 tournament, he had the ball in the net, but his header was ruled out for a dubious offside call. Ever humble, Milburn worked as a collier at Hazelrigg Colliery during his career. A lifelong smoker, even when at the peak of his playing powers, he died in 1988 aged 64 from lung cancer. Stanley Matthews. A man that needs no introduction. Every football fan knows the name Stanley Matthews, the wizard of the dribble. At 35 years old, it was assumed that Matthews was in the twilight of his career for the 1950 World Cup. He was just hitting his stride, famously playing until he was 50, and also playing 2 matches at the next World Cup in 1954, aged 39. In 1956, he became the first ever Ballon d'Or winner. But in 1950, Matthews was the victim of a typically boneheaded FA decision. He was sent on a goodwill mission to Canada before joining the rest of the squad in Brazil. The FA felt his talents wouldn't be needed until deeper in the tournament. By the time he made the grueling, 28-hour journey to Rio to join the team, he'd missed the training camp and the first match. He watched the historic 1-0 USA defeat from the stands, another victim of the FA refusing to change the winning 11. Matthews finally started against Spain but couldn't prevent the 1-0 loss, commenting that the climate made it difficult to breathe during the game and lamenting the lack of adequate preparation. Ever keen to adapt, he scouted Brazil's matches at the tournament, observing their open and fluid attacking play. He wanted to stay in Brazil to further study South American football, feeling the style would be a perfect fit for Stan Mortensen and his Blackpool team, but was forced to return immediately by the FA. A real crowd pleaser, able to draw thousands of supporters to watch him play wherever he went, Sir Stan also holds the distinction of being knighted while still playing professionally. He continued to work in football after retiring. Famously, he ignored the apartheid regime in South Africa to found a black players' team in Soweto. When he died in 2000, aged 85, 100,000 people lined the streets of Stoke-on-Trent for his funeral. The great Baily himself paid tribute, saying Stanley Matthews taught them the way football should be played. Bill Eckersley. Also brought in for the final game was stalwart defender Bill Eckersley, a one-club man for Blackburn Rovers. Another surprise selection, without a single senior cap to his name, he got thrown in at the deep end in the must-win match against Spain at the Maracana. He was unable to prevent the unlucky 1-0 loss that day. He famously worked as a lorry and taxi driver either side of his extensive playing career at Blackburn. The Ewood Park legend died in 1982, aged 57. Eddie Baily. Another surprise England debutant thrown into the side for the crucial Spain match was Tottenham Hotspur's Eddie Baily. The inside forward was widely credited for being the creative force behind Tottenham's exciting push-and-run side in the post-war period. A Royal Air Force pilot during the war, he was rumoured killed in action and Spurs even let his registration lapse. The rumour of his death was greatly exaggerated, and he went on to make his ultimately futile England debut at this World Cup. After football, he came back to Spurs as assistant manager, helping to guide them to the FA Cup and UEFA Cup in the 1960s. He was beloved as a strict but fair coach and died in 2010 at age 85. Wilf Mannion. Middlesbrough's golden boy played the first 2 matches at inside forward in the 1950 tournament. A stylish player, Stanley Matthews himself called Mannion the Mozart of football for his effortless and graceful play. He scored England's second ever World Cup goal against Chile but found himself dropped after the USA defeat. Mannion's football story would turn to heartbreak. In 1955, 5 years after the World Cup, he was banned from football for life. He was found complicit in corruption when he failed to disclose the identity of a club that had offered him a bribe during an FA investigation. After his football career, he became a journalist and worked on the Vauxhall production line. Sadly, in later life he had financial troubles and was forced to sell his England caps. It wasn't until 1983 that a testimonial match finally honoured him. He died in 2004, aged 85. Jimmy Mullen. Opposite Tom Finney for the opening 2 matches was not Stanley Matthews, but Wolves legend Jimmy Mullen. He played against Chile and the USA but was finally dropped for Matthews for the Spain game. Another one-club man in a squad packed with them, he played his entire career for Wolverhampton Wanderers across 20 seasons, making 486 appearances and scoring 112 goals. He'd later be selected again for England in 1954, winning 12 caps in total and making history as England's first super sub. Mullen was the first player to come on as a substitute for England, and he marked the occasion by scoring one of his 6 international goals. The Wolves Hall of Famer passed away in 1987 at the age of 64. John Aston. Manchester United's John Aston started in defence alongside Alf Ramsey and Laurie Hughes against Chile and the USA, but was also dropped after the USA defeat. Another player late to the party, he was touring the USA with his club before the start of the tournament, but he got no rest and was thrown straight in. A key player in Matt Busby's United revolution, he made over 200 appearances for the Red Devils in the post-war period, paving the way for the Busby Babes. Aston's career was, unfortunately, cut short by tuberculosis, which required a lung removal. His son would continue his footballing legacy, famously lifting the European Cup with United in 1968. His proud dad was there to witness it whilst serving with the backroom team at the time. Roy Bentley. The somewhat unexpected choice at centre-forward was Chelsea's main man, Roy Bentley. It was odd, not because Bentley wasn't a top-class player, but because he wasn't known as an out-and-out striker. He liked to drift into space and pull defenders out of position in the manner of a modern number 10. Not your typical centre-forward play for the era. Bentley was critical of the lack of tactics and game plan for the tournament, as well as the lack of preparation. He felt he didn't play well with his England colleagues as they hadn't had time to learn his unusual approach to the game. He was also dropped for the final game, making way for Jackie Milburn. A Chelsea legend, he finished as their top scorer for 8 consecutive seasons, bagging 150 goals in total. He would earn 12 England caps in his career and eventually moved into management after his playing days ended in his late 30s. He lived to be 93, passing away in April 2018. Then, there were the squad members who were along for the ride, enduring the searing heat and dodgy hotel food without ever stepping onto the pitch for their troubles. Ted Ditchburn. Backup goalkeeper Ted Ditchburn was a Tottenham legend. Some were surprised he wasn't first choice given his chemistry with Ramsey, but Bert Williams had the position on lockdown. A pioneer of quick, counter-attacking play, he would play quick, short throws out to his fullbacks to begin attacks. Spurs would use this tactic to great effect in the post-war period. His other asset was his frying pan-like hands, which served Tottenham well in 247 consecutive appearances, not to mention hundreds more. He only won 6 England caps, with his career mostly overlapping England mainstay Frank Swift. Jim Taylor. Fulham centre-half Jim Taylor didn't make his full England debut until age 33. He made over 250 appearances for Fulham in his career and had an extensive career in lower league management after retiring. He is one of only 12 England internationals to represent the Cottagers. Laurie Scott. Laurie Scott was an Arsenal great, but in 1950 he was an injury-prone, 33-year-old veteran who hadn't been capped in 2 years. Called up as backup to Ramsey, he didn't play in the tournament. A calm and commanding defender, he had won the FA Cup with Arsenal just a few weeks earlier, despite struggling with multiple injuries in prior seasons. Bill Nicholson. Spurs icon Bill Nicholson was selected in 1950 but never played a minute at the tournament. Aside from being a handy player for Spurs, he'd find lasting fame in the White Hart Lane dugout. He'd go on to become the most important figure in Tottenham's history, managing them to 8 major trophies including the 1961 double. He definitely earned the title, Mr. Tottenham Hotspur. Henry Cockburn. Henry Cockburn also arrived late, along with John Aston, after completing Manchester United's tour of the USA and was rewarded for his dedication by not playing a single minute. The diminutive, yet athletic halfback is a fondly remembered figure at United in the early Busby days, making over 200 appearances and winning the league and FA Cup. He'd go on to have a successful coaching career. Willie Watson. In the summer of 1950, Sunderland's Willie Watson had a choice to make. Go to the Football World Cup with England, or stay home and make considerably more money playing first-class cricket. Watson was a rare double international, playing both football and cricket at international level for England. He ultimately chose the World Cup but was not rewarded for his decision. The payment for attending the tournament paled in comparison to what he could have made at cricket that summer. The FA even had the nerve to say he overclaimed expenses. For all this, he didn't even play a single minute of football at the tournament. He had a lengthy career in cricket and football management before emigrating to South Africa. The 1950 World Cup wasn't a failure of individual players. They turned up in good faith hoping to bring home the cup. The 1950 squad represented a golden generation, packed full of legends, but talent alone couldn't overcome poor preparation and ignorance by those in charge. It taught the FA a harsh lesson. England couldn't just turn up and win. They needed to modernise, to have football men in charge of the team and allow them to make the key decisions. They would eventually get this right 16 years later. If you're interested in hearing more football stories from back in the day, hit subscribe and check out the videos on screen. Please like and share this video to help our channel grow. We'll be back with more good old-fashioned football, probably World Cup related, next time.